Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Bring It Back. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that were canceled and or short-lived that I would like to see get brought back in some shape or form. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Hulu series Helstrom. Now, really quickly, if you're unfamiliar with Helstrom is, basically it follows the two Helstrom siblings, Damon and Anna, who are basically have always had this shadow of like the more darker supernatural side of the world following after them. I mean, really quickly, I should interject. If you're unaware, this is a Marvel property. It doesn't really references that it's in the MCU, but I guess you could technically say that is, but nothing really, at least that I'm aware of, outwardly says that is. But basically, they're dealing with the fact is for a long time, most of their life, their mom has been possessed. And obviously, like, Damon is part of, like, the church / an organization that deals with possessions and stuff like that. So they've had to deal with the more demon side of things. Obviously, Damon handles things his way, Anna handles things kind of her way, kind of living by her own standards and rules. But obviously, they soon learned that, like, a greater threat, that threat being their dad, because he was, like, a serial killer who had actually kidnapped Anna when she was a little girl, but she managed to get away. Obviously, she's the only one that really ever knows the truth about what went down. But obviously, it's about stopping their dad, because obviously what Damon has kind of came from their dad. Because it's like, because obviously there's still the thing you're wondering, like, well, who is their dad? There's some stuff that kind of hints like maybe this person is their dad, because it's like, was their dad, you know, possessed, or was he always evil, you know? So as Damon's trying to save his mom, they have to confront this. And obviously there's also the church that gets involved, and which that turns into a whole complicated. I'm not explaining it well, but there's a lot of interesting threads to go about. Obviously, you know, you might have heard recently news came about that the show was canceled, which kind of came as a surprise to very few people, because obviously Helstrom was kind of one of those last ties to old Marvel TV. Once again, if you're unaware, Marvel is going more in a direction when it comes to their television that is all going to tie into the MCU. So like obviously all the Disney Plus shows, WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, and a slew of many others. That's more the direction things are going to go in. Obviously, things in the past have been Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., all the stuff on Netflix, on Hulu, Runaways, so on and so forth. Stuff like that has been in the Marvel Universe, technically part of the MCU, but just never got recognized as part of the MCU. So going into this, most people knew that this was going to be a one-off, because this was also supposed to tie in, like, because there was also going to be a Ghost Rider TV show, but that got pulled away for many different, like, well, I don't think anyone knows for sure the reasons behind it, but regardless, so a lot of people, myself included, went into this hoping, you know, not hoping, but knowing that this was going to be a one-off, but hoping that it would be more. But especially the way season 1 ends, I'm not going to spoil it, but it ends on a very big cliffhanger of like, okay, what would they have done with a second season? There were some things resolved, but in many different regards, other stuff, you know, like where certain storylines would have taken in a second season. It's a show that I wouldn't want just brought, well, it's a complicated thing, because it's a thing where it's like, I know no matter what, we're never going to get a continuation of this story. Like, so for example, like, it's no like crossing my fingers hoping for a second or third season. That's unlikely to happen, because this is saying goodbye to what Marvel TV was before. Thought I kind of said my goodbyes when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ended, but, you know, kind of had to say them again. But I was hopeful that was going to be a second season, but I really knew there wasn't going to be. So for me, the only thing I can hope is that maybe, just maybe, the MCU will decide to pick this up. But if they do, they're most likely going to reboot it. I doubt they're going to continue the continuity from that, just because it's a similar conversation people have had about how are they going to fold in the Netflix shows, because those are very tonally different stuff from some of the other previous Marvel stuff, whether it be like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like Cloak and Dagger, Runaways, or even just the movies. Like, those shows are very darker tonally, so like, how do you mesh those worlds together? Obviously, there's been talk, because obviously potentially Charlie Cox returning as Daredevil, how he might fit into the MCU. So there's been conversations about that. So that's what I most likely feel like. They probably reboot this, but because they pull a lot of and probably, I just don't know how you'd handle that, because, you know, I mean, it'd probably be just like trying to fit Punisher in this universe as well. Because if you're unaware, like, this show was very unique in regard because it's done something no other Marvel shows really tackled, and that's like the more horror supernatural side. We got tidbits here and there, like the closest show I can think of in this similar vein would be Legion. Granted, that wasn't in the MCU, that was still, you know, X-Men related Fox Marvel. So But that's tonally the closest they could compare it to. But even like, you know, on the more supernatural side of things, the only thing we've really delved into the MCU that's like that is arguably Iron Fist, because it tackles a little bit of the supernatural side of things, and Doctor Strange. So this show is unique mainly for the horror side of things, but also the more supernatural side of things, which you could obviously throw Ghost Rider when he was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in as well, but still. So I don't know if you get something like this. Granted, they did say that obviously Doctor Strange 2 Into the Multiverse of Madness is going to be horror-esque, but granted, who knows how much of they'll lean into that. This show, you know, I made constant comparisons. It very much made me feel kind of like an Exorcist vibe in many different ways than one, but I don't know if they'll necessarily pull on that for the MCU, just because, you know, I don't know if that's a side of the MCU they're going to really tackle. I mean, they tackled a little bit with the whole Dormammu situation. You know, Doctor Strange already tackled that because of like someone like Dormammu, but I don't know if they'll really lean into that in the more horror side of things. Like I said, it depends on just how Doctor Strange plays out. But like I said, I get the feeling if we're ever going to see anything Helstrom related, it's going to be rebooted, which is a bummer because obviously I got attached. Even just through this one season, I would have liked to see where this story goes. I mean, that's kind of the benefit of it kind of have being its own thing. They were able to kind of take it in the directions they wanted to. Obviously, when you fold it into the continuity, you probably have to reconstruct things and kind of make it a little more tonally, make sure that it tonally meshes with everything else in the MCU. I mean, obviously that's going to be, I mean, that's in general the beautiful thing about like the Marvel universe. I think comic wise, because you do have so many branches. You have the science fiction side of things, you have the fantasy side of things, you have the horror side of things, the supernatural side of things, all coexisting in a universe. As someone who's not well versed in comic books, I can't comment on that because some people be like, yeah, that leads to issues in some points here and there, and storyline wise and stuff like that. But still, it's a series I would like to see come back. But like I said, if anything, it get rebooted. At the very least, I would like to see them do something with it. It'd be cool if they could bring in these actors portraying these particular characters and fold them in, but I see that as unlikely. They'll probably come to these storylines and characters their own way, you know. So obviously this is just kind of, you know, how I feel about it. But yeah, but really that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.